Good morning. Welcome to Lord's Day Live Bible class. Glad to have you with me. Beautiful day here in Northeast Arkansas, but a little on the chilly side, a little cool inside my office here, but I'm not complaining. Lord's Day Live, got a lot of stuff to cover this morning. We're going to begin seeing some of the ways that a certain passage fits into our timeline and our geographical map, boot, blah, banana, bow, banana, all that kind of stuff. Yep. We're going to have to draw that up here in just a second. And so I need you as teachers to make sure that all of your people have a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to use both sides of the paper today. And so I guess you could give them two pieces of paper if you wanted to, but got a lot to cover, so we need to get that paper distributed and the pencils because we want to rapidly look at some things. You might recall last time we were starting off with this idea of decision making, specifically launching it because we were talking about graduates. Well, I'm going to stay with that theme throughout the month of May. And the whole idea of making decisions, how do we make decisions, doesn't have to apply just to graduates. There's a lot of decisions that we make in life, and we need to make sure that we are putting God first in those decisions. But how do you do it whenever you come to a point where, maybe I got two things and they're equally good? They both of them would present a lot of glory to God. How do I decide which direction He wants me to take? I just flip a coin? Well, I think that this particular process will help you understand, at least from a biblical perspective, what you might do in order to make that decision and at the end of the day be confident that your decision was made correctly. All right, making decisions. We're going to stay on that slide for just a little while. Making decisions. You might recall that last time when we opened up with this discussion, I gave you that little acronym DATE. And so what I need you to do first off is I need you to go ahead and put our letters. You don't have to be fancy if you don't want to, but I don't know. I just get bored not being fancy, so I'm going to go like that. And there you go. You got date. And boy, I'll tell you what, that marker doesn't work very good, does it? Can you guys see that? That actually does say date. It really does. Oh, looky here. Oh, that's a lot darker, isn't it? Do you guys like that better? There you go. Everybody got their date? And you might recall last time I told you, you can use the word date to remind you, teenagers, if you're a teenager, dating is, one of the times that you make some of the most important decisions in your life. We tend to use the dating scene to discover who we want to spend the rest of our life with as far as a spouse is concerned. If you're an adult, you've already moved past that stage, you can use this acronym from the standpoint of, to date the day you made this particular decision, whatever. Anyhow, through the month of May, we're going to look at all four of these things. The first letter, D, stands for, as you might recall, well, maybe, do you recall? You were with me last week? If you weren't with me last week, you can pedal backwards in these things and you can watch the introduction last week. Go to my YouTube channel or go to sunnychilds.com, top right-hand corner. It's got that audio video link. You can go there and you can pick up all this stuff. But anyhow, what's the D? D is for, yep, that's right, deny. All right, so deny. The first thing that you have to do in the process of making a good decision is you got to deny yourself. You got to put God first. You've got to be willing to sacrifice your own dreams, passions, etc., so that God can rule. Several illustrations we could use in life for this. Abraham literally was called upon to sacrifice his son Isaac on the altar. Remember that? Now, he didn't actually go through with it because God stopped him. And he could see the faith in Abraham that Abraham wasn't going to, or Abraham was going to do whatever God told him to, even if it was as harmful to him to slay his own son. He would even give up his own son. But God stayed his hand, sent that angel to stay his hand, so he did not slay his own son, but he was willing to deny himself to that level. I'm also thinking about Hannah. You might recall she couldn't have children, and so she prayed to God, would you please give me the opportunity to have a child? And God did. He opened up her womb, and she was able to give forth, arguably, one of the greatest characters of the Old Testament, Samuel, because Samuel was not just a judge, he was also a prophet, and an amazing prophet at that. But that all came about because Hannah was willing to give God ultimate denial of herself and give God everything that he rightfully deserves. And you might remember she did that. After she nursed him and brought him to a certain age, she actually went and gave him to the temple work. And there's where he stayed. Anyhow, deny. So you got to be willing to deny yourself. And if you can't go that far in your decision-making process, you might as well stop. The last three don't matter. You got to be able to, first of all, deny yourself. So let's do a little doodle. It's pretty simple stuff, but get you about 5, we're going to call them rocks, okay? I'm going to go 5 rocks and build you some more on here. Anybody have any idea what I'm doing here? Put another little rock there. Okay, and then we got here coming, we got another rock, and then we'll go one more rock. Anybody, yeah, it's an altar. In fact, we could probably go one more level. Let's go with that. One more. One of my favorite stories in all the Bible is when Elijah calls down a fireball from heaven. Remember that? Prophets of Baal, Mount Carmel, and all the argument that's going on. And Elijah basically gives them all day. He says, here's the test. If your God's real, he can light the fire. If my God's real, he can light the fire. You go first. And so they prayed and they danced and they cut themselves and they did all kinds of perverse things all day long trying to get the attention of their God. And their God never lit the fire. You know why? Because he's not a God. Our God, however, heard Elijah's prayer. And you might remember he dug the trench around the base, and dumped all that water on it. It made it real dramatic. And then he goes to praying, and all of a sudden, whoosh! Fireball from heaven lights up that sucker. I love that story. All right, now at the top of this thing, of course, you got to get some sticks. All right, so just kind of go weird like that. Okay, you have to have some sticks at the top. Probably the fuel for the fire or whatever. And then we're going to draw our flame. Right. Oh, that's pretty lousy flame there. Well, you're just going to have to put up with it. So there's the flame, okay? And you can do smoke if you want, whatever. But anyhow, the idea is that we're going to make a sacrifice of self. Okay? That's what is being said here with this idea of deny yourself. That if you're going to make a proper decision, you've got to literally crawl up on the altar and sacrifice your own will, your own desire. So can you pray, God, whatever you want? Can you pray that? If you can't, then the last three aren't going to matter to you. And remember last time when I concluded this thing, I told you a prayer that you need to write down. You need to pray this over and over again because this will help God to have a greater access to your heart. And he, at the end of the day, is the only thing that can save us. He's the only dynamic that is going to be able to make the proper decisions through us. But you've got to give him access to your heart. D is for deny. Here's the prayer. God, help me to want what you want me to want. Help me to want what you want me to want. Pray that repeatedly, over and over again, that God will change your heart to such a position of denial that you will want whatever he wants you to want. God will recognize that prayer, and he will even help change from within your desires. We'll see some of that in this passage here in just a moment. So, deny yourself. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 is what we looked at last time. What I want to do now is I'm going to come over here, and I want to say, from the timeline and the geographical standpoint, I want us to look at what group of people were being addressed with this subject matter about being a living sacrifice that's holy and pleasing, your true and proper worship, etc. Okay, now I'm going to do this really rapidly because we've already done this, but you ought to be able to continue to review this in your mind, and you ought to be able to keep up with me at this point. At least I hope that you can. At the top, we're going to have the timeline. At the bottom, we're going to have the geographical map. So, way up here, dot, dot, dot. Remember? Line, dot, dot, dot. All right, can you see that? That line's pretty sad, but I don't have time to deal with it. You divide your timeline into thirds. Remember that? And they are what? 2,000 years apart. I'm not going to write that. All right, remember 2,000 years apart. All right, so 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. This is creation. Remember, God said, let there be. This is you and me, way over here. All right? And then after you got your bookends, creation, and us at the other end. The reason the dot, dot, dot is because it hasn't finished yet, obviously. All right, first 2,000 years. What is the marker? What's the main thing that happens first 2,000 years in? And make these big and bold because we're going to have some other lines. First thing that happens? Yes, that's exactly right. You draw yourself a tent. That's Abraham, right? Second thing that happens? Yes, that's the cross, the crucifixion. So you got 2,000 years Abraham, 2,000 years Jesus, 2,000 years us. All right, you divide the first segment in half. And what do you have? About 1,000 years in, draw you your boat, and you've got Noah, right? It's kind of a sad little boat. Yeah, it's pretty sad. But anyhow, that's Noah, okay? So you got your Noah happening there. Then you come over here, you divide this one in half. So you got another, so this is 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, okay? What is this period marked by the center point? You draw your, remember? Star of David. That's when the kingdoms are going to be set up, all right? Now we're going to divide this part in half, and you're going to draw your 10 commandments. Boop, 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 boop. And you're going to divide this approximately in half. It's really only 400 years. So I'll put 400 here just so I'm clear. 400 years. And what do we have here? Another word bubble with a question mark. Why? Because God is silent during that period of time, right? Then you're going to come over here and you're going to draw another mark, and that's going to be the Bible. Because 100 years in, the Bible's complete. So you got your timeline up there, right? Now at the bottom, I need you to draw the boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being bounced beside balloons. Teachers, go back and review that in past times if you don't have it. But it's very important that your students have that, because we're going to start tying into both the timeline and the geography of these things, okay? So, draw yourself. This is my piece of paper, all right, just so that you're not confused. All right. Sorry about that little crack here in the thingy, but, what do you do? Okay, so you got your, first of all, what is it? Yep, boot. Okay, so draw your boot, then you got a blob, right? Boot, blob. Banana, boat, with bubbles, that's the islands there in the Mediterranean, right? Boot, blob, banana, boat, with bubbles, being balanced. Remember how we did that? You take your hand, remember it kind of looks like your hand, and you draw your hand down here. Boot, blob, banana, boat, being boot, blob, banana, boat, with bubbles, being balanced beside balloons. Remember, you got one balloon, forget that bottom one for them. You got one balloon, that is the Sea of Galilee, that drains into the Jordan River. Looks like what do you call that? That comes from a balloon? That string, that ribbon, whatever it's called. And then at the bottom, you got the Dead Sea, which by the way is drying up. But anyhow, you got the Dead Sea, and it looks like it's a balloon that's lost all of its helium. And then over here, we're going to put the Persian Gulf. And it's got streamers. That's the word, streamers. It's got two streamers that come off here like this. This one over here is the Tigris on the eastern edge, the right edge. On the western edge, that's the Euphrates. Okay? And then lastly, very, very important, remember, you go to the top of the Dead Sea and slightly west, not far, and put you a dot. That's Jerusalem. That's Jerusalem. All right. You got that map. Very important that you have that. I don't even know that next time I'm going to take time to do all that, because I'm looking at my thing here and I'm already half through my time to do class period. So you're just going to have to continue to review this, okay? But what I want to do now is I want to take you, okay, notice our passages from the book of Romans. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I was years, and my dad was a preacher, my mom a Sunday school teacher, and all those kind of things. And so I had a really, a privileged growing up period as far as the Bible is concerned. But I was years into my growing up before I ever discovered that my shirt is untucked. No, just before I ever discovered some of the things with regards to, the Bible isn't just like another book on the shelf. It's not like, reading, Shakespeare or Harry Potter or something like that. I mean, the Bible, this is stuff that actually happened. And if it actually happened, then it happened at a time. And it actually happened in a place. It took me a long time to get there. I'm a little thick. Maybe you're not as thick as I am. I hope that's the truth. But the book of Romans, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. Who do you think the book of Romans was written to? Paul writes it. And he's writing it approximately 57 AD, something in that year. We're going to do the timeline here in a moment. And who do you think he's writing to? Romans? Rome. Yeah. He's writing it to the church at Rome. So how in the world are we going to find the city of Rome on our map? Go to the boot. All right. Everybody over here with the boot? All right. If you go to the boot, you need to go. It's actually about halfway up Italy. Put you a big old dot about halfway up Italy. Okay. If you put your dot down here at the toe of the boot, no, that ain't going to work. If you put it kind of here at the crux of the boot, no, that's not going to work. It's about halfway up Italy. That is where you're going to find the city of Rome. Let's see if I can put an arrow here just so that you can, boom. All right, see that? That's Rome. And so that is where, Paul. That's where Paul was writing to the church at Rome when he wrote Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Now let's go to the timeline. When did he write it? All right. So we come over here. Did he write it back in the time of Noah? Obviously not. How about the time of Abraham? Obviously not. As you move through this, you're going to find, as I've already said, it was about 57 AD, which is about there. That's supposed to be a 7, by the way. I kind of messed it up there, but anyhow, that's a 7. See how that's a 7? and a really sad 5. Anyhow, 57. And so right in here is when we have the book of Romans. Let's just go ahead and write that up there if I'm tall enough. Romans. The reason my shirt keeps coming untucked is because I'm stretching. See how that is? Anyhow, that's where you get the book of Romans. And so now we have placed Rome on our map. We have placed the book of Romans being written on our timeline. And you've got just a little better grip on what's taking place at what point in biblical history, etc., that we get this instruction. Now, let's come back to what the instruction is actually giving us with regards to denying ourselves. There are 3 two-word combinations. That's kind of hard to say. But there are 3 two-word combinations in this passage. I've got them underlined. The first one is living sacrifice. The second one is holy, pleasing. The third one is true, proper. And so there are 3 descriptions given to us here that are kind of a double whammy. They got 2 parts to them. First of all, let's do the first one. That makes sense. First of all, let's do the first one. I mean, where else would you go if you're going to do it first of all? Anyhow. All right, so we're doing the deny ourselves thing, right? You need to be a living sacrifice. That's interesting. We talked about it last week, but that's odd because most sacrifices died in the process. You know what I'm talking about? And so this is a unique twist on things. And so the new covenant, the new kingdom, the church itself, as it comes about, we are asked now to provide a ongoing, living sacrifice. In other words, a sacrifice that doesn't die in the sense that we slit the throat, drain the blood, throw it up on the top of the altar, that kind of thing. But rather a sacrifice that's going to be ongoing in that it has a sacrificial mode from an inner quality more than an external quality. And so he says, make it a living, the second part, sacrifice. An ongoing, perpetual sacrifice. Applications real quickly to you then, as you're making this decision, and ask yourself, am I in a denial mode, denying my own selfishness? You need to ask yourself, are you in a progressive mode, ongoing, constantly moving towards putting God first? Whatever he wants. That's why that prayer is so important. Lord, help me to want what you want me to want. Because that means that you're moving continuously towards God's desires and not your own. All right, the second two-word combination. It's not just a living sacrifice, but this living sacrifice needs to be holy and it needs to be pleasing. Pleasing. Back in the day, there were certain things you could put on this altar that would not be pleasing to God. A pig, for instance. God's not going to be pleased with that. There were certain sacrifices that he wanted under the Old Testament. Well, the same thing is true here. It needs to be a holy and a pleasing sacrifice. The word holy, it means something that is sacred. It's set apart. Obviously, you connect it with God, and that's right, rightfully so. But things that are holy are reverenced. They tend to be things that when you come into the presence of something or someone that is holy, you tend to be self-reflective. You think about yourself in comparison to that. You oftentimes will get more somber. You'll be a little more quiet because, let's just go with the most holy moment, it seems, in our worship service, which is what? Communion. And what does Paul say when you take communion? Examine yourself. Why would we do that? Because it's a time for you and I to compare ourselves to the sanctity of God and recognize there is no way for us to come into his presence if it's not for the fact that Jesus cleansed us. Okay? And so it's holy and it's pleasing. Now let's go back to the pig illustration. Sacrificing a pig on the altar, which I'm told back in the day when they, AD 70, whenever they destroyed the temple and all that, there were abominations that took place, etc. Well, the whole idea of sacrificing something that's not pleasing on the altar, a pig, it'd be just the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish here. By the way, back in the Old Testament, one of the reasons God commanded his people to go in and run everybody out of the promised land is because they were actually sacrificing their children on the altar. God actually saved lives by asking them to go in and wipe out the horrible, perverse people of the promised land. But that's another story. So it's got to be holy and it's got to be pleasing. And so whatever it is that you're doing to deny yourself, make sure that it's holy and it's pleasing. Back in the day, I had a good friend. He was a Catholic, and Lent came around, and during Lent, they do something which, by the way, I think that is an excellent concept, and that is that they decide once a year we're going to give up for a period of time. We're going to give up something for God. And my friend, he didn't take his religion very seriously, and every year he'd give up something like bubble gum, something simple. I'm not even sure he liked bubble gum. And so it was easy. It certainly wasn't holy to him, and it wasn't pleasing because it really wasn't a sacrifice. Whatever you're doing in life, are you really hurting? Is there something missing in your life? Do you actually have a moment of, because you gave that up? It's a little bit like dieting, and maybe Cindy, some months ago, she made us quit all sugar, couldn't have any sugar. And I'm telling you what, and we went a month with no sugar. I think it was a month. Maybe it was just a week, but it seemed like a month. I don't remember. I think it was just a week, but it seemed like a month. But anyhow, I'm telling you, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because every time I walked past the table, I was thinking about sugar. Well, the same idea is here. If you're not giving up something that actually causes you to have a moment of pause, it's not much of a sacrifice. Holy and pleasing, the last two-word combination then, is that it needs to be true and it needs to be proper. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be sincere, something that really comes from your heart. It's not making your child sacrifice something so that you can get. It's yours. It's personal. It's your sacrifice. So, in the wrap-up then, making a decision, you need to deny yourself. How do you do that? Well, you need to recognize it needs to be a living sacrifice that's holy and it's pleasing to God because it's true and it's proper. Don't have time because I've run myself way out of time. But notice verse 2, teachers, look at verse 2, discuss this whole idea of not being conformed to the world, etc., being transformed by your mind. That's very, very important with regards to denying yourself. All right, now, quickly, and I'm going to have to erase while I do this. Okay, there, I know, you can't see it. I'm going to take it off. Give me a second. So teachers, get ready to write this, or no, take a picture of this so that you'll have this for discussion time when I'm gone. All right, you got that? Can you see it? It's not as clean as it could be, but it's as clean as it will be. All right. So here's your questions. Make sure you, get those down. And here, first, second, third thing that I talked about in that lesson just a minute ago. What are your steps? Those two-word combinations that I had. First one, second, third, two-word combinations. Anyhow, got that? All right. Moving on. Time for prayer. A lot of things on the list today. The first one I want to bring to your attention is mothers. Now, I realize Mother's Day is next Sunday, right? But I got to thinking about mentioning this early. In fact, I put up a Sunny Day Devo this morning. 7 o'clock this morning they go out, once a month. I try to do it on the first Sunday of the month. But anyhow, go back and listen to that because it's a poem that I wrote about mothers and it's got pictures and everything. And you'll probably cry. Well, you probably won't. But anyhow, it's nice. It's okay. But I was thinking about moms and how important moms are in our life. And I got to thinking, I realize Mother's Day is a week away, but you know what? I need to give everybody a reminder to start now. Okay, you've got 7 days to get after this. A week from today, we're in the middle of it. So what are you going to do during the next week? I want you to be prayerful about your mom. If you don't do anything else, if you don't even get to the store and buy a card, for your mom, and shame on you if you don't. But if you don't even do that, please, for the next 7 days, every time you pray, say something about mom. If she was a great mom, and mine still present tense, is a great mom, then by all means, thank God for all the advantages that she gave you. If she wasn't a particularly great mom, then pray for her, that God will get a hold of her heart. Pray for your situation. And if you're a mom or potential of being a mom, if you're a woman, or if you're going to marry a woman who could become a mom, pray for that. Pray for the mothers of our world. Because I'm telling you, the hand that rocks the cradle truly does rule the world. And I believe they are the most significant part of the equation to restoring our nation, restoring some balance of sanity. Mothers. Pray for mothers. My friend Doug got a report this week from his wife Joyce. He's really struggling with some of the treatments that they're giving him. And so if you remember Doug, godly man. I love him. And a former mentor of mine lives there in Louisiana. Another good friend of mine, Carl. I'm not really sure how to explain all the issues that are going on with Carl, but it's health related. And he and his sweet wife, I've eaten in their home. They've just been so good to me. And I know respiratory things, some of that kind of thing, but I'm told that they called hospice in this past week. I'm not sure to what extent that is going to go, but really concerned for Carl. Please pray for him and his health and his sweet wife as she tries to take care of his needs, because I love them so much. We got a big map summer coming up, the Missionaries for America program. I'm the director of that, and it's just going to be huge. First 4 weeks the only 4 weeks of June, we have 4 separate quests that we put our kids through. The first quest is team building. And Matt Vaught is in charge of that week. And it's all about bringing a team together and teamwork and that kind of thing, because mission work requires teamwork. The second week is homemade rolls. That one, the directors of that is my son, Bryson, who's a youth minister in Bono, and my wife, who I like her a lot. Anyhow, those two are the directors of homemade rolls. And the greatest mission field you got in your life is your home. And we talk about the home a lot during that one. The third week is The Voice. And Jenna is the what do you call it? The director from that for that particular week, and that's a real popular week. We sing, talk about using your voice in an evangelistic way, those kind of things. And Kathy is the last director, and what is her week called? Life Missions, a lot of service projects, that kind of a thing. Big summer. Then we'll have an adult week, adult studies week, the week of the 4th of July, and so talk that up and come and be with us. We've got cabins that you can stay in or bring your camper or whatever it may be. But we're talking about a lot of controversial subjects. How do you study the Bible? Make sure the Bible interprets the Bible. That's that week. And then the last 3 weeks of July are wrapped up with a group that is it's a group of more mature mapsters who are drawn from the bigger group, and they go on a road trip with us. One of the things that they'll do during that time is they'll present a VBS. Bayou Jack, Louisiana is where we're going to do our VBS this year. Anyhow, pray for Matt, please. Clara, colon cancer. Haven't had an update in some time on that. I'd love to get an update if anybody out there knows anything. 2 of my friends in Indiana, that's their daughter. Luke with epilepsy and the migraines, and bless his heart, I haven't had an update on that one either in a while. And then lastly, Tina, who I've been able to see regularly. She's doing really well, but a lot of stuff, as you can imagine, trying to overcome breast cancer. And Linda, haven't had an update on Linda in a while either, but I'm pretty sure that surgery took place, and I hope that everything is going well there. So if you got an update, Linda, I would love to update our people with regards to that. So there's your prayer list. You be praying about that. I'm going to slip over here and switch to the sermon time. Well, good morning. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had a major problem just now. I slipped over there prayer time, and I don't know why, but my file that I have for the sermon time, it's gone. And so what do you do in a situation like this? Well, I guess you just revert back to the old-fashioned, let me talk to you about some things. And so what I'll do, in order to make this semi-entertaining for you, I'm going to erase all of this here, and I will put my sermon title on here. You need to open your Bibles, because I don't have it to throw on the slide here. You need to open your Bibles to Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Philippians 4, 4 through 7. Philippians 4, 4 through 7. Here's the title. Messianic. Did I spell that right? Messianic Mental Health. I've got to get rid of this particular ink pen. It is not writing very well at all. So I'm going to throw that There's two S's in Messianic. Somebody out there should have been telling me that. There's two S's in Messianic. That's it. I got my second one in. Messianic health. Messianic health. Messianic mental health. That is actually the topic. Messianic mental health. One thing I've noticed about this stuff, as far as tech is concerned and all of it, it's great because I'm able to beam this around the world and have folks over there that are watching. I'm thrilled for all of that kind of stuff. But boy, I tell you, something goes down like your screen. I had all kinds of wonderful pictures. Maybe I can even show you. Can you see the picture there? It has a picture of the brain, and right there, and I had all the passages ready for you. It was going to be a great sermon. But I don't know, something happened. But anyhow, we can still make it happen. Messianic mental health. Messianic, and I know that's a weird title for a sermon, but that's one of the reasons I do it, because I'm a weird person. But I was thinking about Messianic mental health, and I was thinking about this passage from Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Now let me just read it to you. I hope you got your Bibles open already, but here it is. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That's where this whole idea was starting. But as I was reading this particular passage, I was noticing that it says that we need to rejoice in the Lord. And so there's your Messianic idea, the Messiah, okay? And then second of all, it tells us that we need to be gentle because the Lord is near, Messianic. And then lastly, don't be anxious because we can present our requests to God, the Messianic idea of this. Let me set you up, however, with something that I found in an article. Now, that's not right. Cindy actually presented this to me. Now, Cindy doesn't present me with a lot of reading material. She knows that I'm not a big, I read, but I only read stuff that, really, that sounds horribly selfish, but I don't like to read. And so if I'm going to read something that I want to read. And so generally you give me a book or something like that. I appreciate that kind of thing, but I'm not likely to read it. However, when Cindy gives me something to read, it's almost always really, really important. And it was this week. I'm just going to read. This is from The Guardian. Jameson Webster, a clinical psychologist, reflects on the combination of cultural factors at play in this disturbing trend. The trend is largely that we've got a lot of suicides that are happening in our culture, and it seems to be on the increase. And here's the explanation that is given, or at least some of the statistics. Perhaps it was fitting that we were greeted with sobering news from the CDC last week. This was written, by the way, 3 years ago in 2016. So I suspect the statistics are even worse now. After a decline in suicide in the United States prior to 1999, the rate is up more than 24% for all populations under the age of 75. All populations under the age of 75, 24%, almost a quarter percent, not quarter percent, 25% rise in suicides. It goes on to say, suicide, they report, is now one of the 10 leading causes of death. Given that suicide is often difficult to determine, or given that suicide is often difficult to determine, these statistics may not reveal the full picture. I guess he's trying to say that sometimes we're not even sure whether it was a suicide, or obviously we don't know all the purposes or the reason a person decided that they were going to take their life. But here's the paragraph that I thought was rather interesting, because women are called to be the nurturers of our families. They're called to be the ones who give us stability, oftentimes with regards to the compassionate side. Fathers bring us the stability with regards to, being big and strong and going out and bringing stuff in. Women tend to go in and bring stuff out of us. And this paragraph really bothers me. It's the reason Cindy brought it to my attention. But there is something even more surprising and strange in this report. The suicide rate has increased for women in particular during this period of time, narrowing the gaps in the suicide rate between men and women. Men have always taken their lives more often than women throughout history, I guess. But here's the point. The suicide rate is up 63% for women ages 45 to 65 and 200% for girls ages 10 to 14. We've got a major spike in suicide rate. a major spike in those who are claiming their own lives. Which leads us back to, and I wish I had my picture, which leads us back to this whole idea of the Messianic mental health. What's bringing this about? What can we do to change it as far as individuals who are struggling to cope with our world? Before I go to this passage from Philippians 4, let me quote one other from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16. For who has known the mind of our Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Paul says to the church at Corinth, he says, folks, we've got the mind of Christ within us if we are God's people. And therefore, we ought to have the same messianic mental health program going on that Jesus would instruct us to have in order to avoid suicide rates such as this. Now let's go to our passage. There are three things that I find rather remarkable in this passage that I think are keys to helping us avoid the suicide rates, to turn them back, especially within the church. We ought to be mentally sound because we give our minds over to the Lord. Three things he says in this passage will help us in that process. And by the way, when I say we ought to be mentally sound, I'm not saying that if you're not mentally sound that you're not a Christian. We all struggle with something. We all have issues, and all of us struggle in the mental area. I'm just saying that we've got information that solves this. Unlike the world and secular psychology and all the stuff that leans upon humanism and that kind of, we've got stuff that actually works. I'm not saying that all of us got it all together, including the guy standing in front of you with the red shirt on, but I am saying that at least we know the steps that we should take in order to get us mentally sound. Messianic mental health, first of all, starts with rejoicing. He says that we are to be people. Let me show you the passage again. I hope you got your Bibles open. He says that we are to be people who rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. The thing that's interesting about that is he says it twice. That we are to be rejoicers. And again, I say rejoice. So the first thing that needs to happen is we need to be rejoicing people. A few weeks ago, I posted during our sermon time, during Lord's Day Live, I posted a title, or I posted a lesson on if you're happy and you know it. I'd like for you to review that, or go back in my feed and find that if you haven't listened to it. But in the opening of that lesson, I took you to a time in we call it Thanksmas, and the family gets together, and we had one of those moments. And I remember I told you about I was sitting in the recliner, and my boys were sitting over here playing the guitars together. I loved it, and they sang it, and it was just wonderful. Straight ahead of me was little Judah, age 2. And Judah was playing with the Christmas ornaments on the Christmas tree. And then over here around me, to my right side, was my wife and daughter-in-law, and they were cooking stuff that just smelled so heavenly. It was so wonderful. And I was sitting in the recliner, and I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm happy. Thus the title, If You're Happy and You Know It. And I said it's interesting how the happiness sometimes sneaks up on us. But here's what you might go back and review that sermon. I told you we need to hang on to that happy moment, etc. But here's the point that I think is relevant to what we're talking about today. You know what I could do? Let's move this thing over here so you can actually see better. I was having that whole black thing over there. You don't even need to see that. See, isn't that better? All right, back to the point. Rejoice. You need to hang on to this idea of rejoicing. Okay? And this whole idea of if you're happy and you know at those moments you're sitting in the recliner, you hear your grandchildren playing in the backyard and your wife giggling with your daughter-in-law in the kitchen and whatever. And you think, I'm happy. All right, well, he says, in order for us to have messianic mental health, the first thing is you've got to really focus in on these moments of rejoicing. And notice he says it twice. We need to focus in on what it is that is making us rejoice. What it is that gives us these moments of rejoicing in our life. And generally speaking, it's going to be very, very simple stuff. It's going to be inexpensive. It's going to be something that probably doesn't even cost you a lot of effort. It's just something that is part of the ongoing process of your Christian life that brings you to a level of rejoicing. You need to learn to hang on to that if you want to have mental health, according to our passage. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Now, how does this tie into mental health? We'll go all the way down here to verse 7 because that's where the context says, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Messianic mental health. In Christ Jesus is where we need to be, and the way to be people who are acting like Jesus with regards to mental health is we need to learn to rejoice. Double time it, by the way. We need to learn to hold on to those moments where I am happy. You're not going to find it at the bottom of a bottle. You're not going to find it by spending a lot of money. You're not going to find it on a cruise. You're not going to find it fill in the blank. Rejoicing in this sense is going to generally be found in something very simple where you just sit back and you say, wow. It's the Romans 1 kind of thing where we are left without excuse because God, even in nature, screams at us, I love you. That's why I did that. That's why you see that flower growing in the garden and you see that bud on the tree. We've got to learn to rejoice. Number 2, the second thing that he says here is we need to learn to be gentle. Gentle. Go back to our passage here. He says, verse 5, let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near. Again, you see the Lord idea there, so messianic. Let your gentleness be evident to all. I want to pause here, though, because gentleness, I think that the translators really struggled with this particular word. And you see it in the various translations. Because when I say gentle and all of a sudden you got this little baby in my arms, I'm being all warm and fuzzy and all that. And although that's part of it, that's not the full definition. In fact, I'm going to give you that from the Greek. Here's part of the definition for the word gentle. This is gentle in the sense of truly fair by relaxing overly strict standards in order to keep the spirit of the law. Let me read it again. Relaxing overly strict standards in order to keep the spirit of the law. I'm not saying that in order for us to have mental health, messianic mental health, that we have to become liberals. And I'm not saying that we just throw all the standards out the window. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I am saying that we've got to learn to separate that which is important from that which doesn't really matter. We got to start majoring in the majors and not majoring in the minors. I had a Bible discussion just this past week with an individual we were talking about something that our fellowship is largely divided over with regards to what you can and cannot do within the worship service. And the thing that's interesting about that particular subject is that there's not a command given for or a command given against, it doesn't seem. And yet we divide ourselves over it. And his point was something I've heard many, many times said, but it's so true. We've got to start unifying around the majors and stop dividing over the minors. We need to major in the majors, not major in the minors. And I think this is one of the ideas of gentleness here. If you want to have proper mental health, it seems, according to the Messianic standard, that you not only need to be a rejoicer, but you need to also be gentle or an individual who is not majoring in the minors. We can be so wrapped up in things that really don't matter. And so don't get upset. Don't get all enamored by things that just don't have a lot of influence or shouldn't have a lot of influence in our life or impact in our life. I had a good friend. He was a hippie from way back in the day. Big old mustache. And I remember him saying, it's all going to burn. Anyhow, it's all going to burn. Well, the idea was that he recognized what's happening. At the end of this process, all this stuff we're collecting to ourselves and all the storage buildings we've got full of garbage and all that stuff that we're unwilling to give up, it's all going to burn in the end anyhow. Those are minors. Don't major in the minors. Major in the majors. There's enough to be upset about and concerned about in this world without majoring in that which really doesn't matter. And that's really what he is saying here with regards to this idea of gentleness. That we need to be people. Well, notice how the passage plays out. He says, verse 5, let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near. What's that supposed to mean? The Lord is near, meaning that he's close. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. The Lord is near, and therefore we ought to be people who are enamored by those things that really matter with regards to what the Lord thinks, what the Lord would want. Thus, the messianic, well, I don't know why I can't say that, messianic mental health. So first of all, you need to be a person who rejoices. Second of all, you need to be a person who doesn't major in the minors. You are a gentle individual. And then number 3, he says, number 3, verse 6, Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Don't be anxious about anything. So number 3, do not be anxious. Yes. A-N-X-I-S. Yeah. Do not be anxious. He actually said do not be anxious about anything. Why would we not be anxious? Well, he says it here. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request. The reason we don't have to be anxious is because we've got a direct access to the Father. The God who created all this stuff is the God who we can talk to and ask for his help, his input. So why be anxious when you can pray about it, when you can give it to God and allow God to take it from you? The Greek word that is used here for this do not be anxious, it's actually an old verb, I'm told. It's an old verb for worry and anxiety, but I like this part of the definition. Literally, it means to be divided or distracted. The reason we are struggling today with mental health is because we are so divided and distracted. We need to live in a stream that is consistent rather than having 75 different branches of that stream. That's why I preach so hard on this idea of slow down. Be still and know that he is God. Our families are rushing way too fast because we're so divided, and it causes anxiousness. And when it causes anxiousness, we deny the fact that God can handle this. If we didn't, we would recognize that prayer and supplication would deal with it. And in the process, we major in the minors, number 2. And in that process, it destroys our rejoicing. And so all of a sudden, we're struggling with mental health because, as you can see, we've denied the idea to rejoice. We've been majoring in minors rather than being gentle. And we're anxious about everything when we've got direct access to the most powerful being and everything that is. And yet we're anxious about it. This is the path to messianic mental health. It needs to be taken. All right, before I end, I'd like to read to you a story. It comes from my book. What was the name? Funny Thing Happened on Our Way to Heaven. And it's entitled Startled by God. It was way back in 2005, so Gabriel was very, very young. In fact, he was still in his car seat, it sounds like. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Cindy sucked in her breath and exclaimed, "Did you see that?" Startled by her reaction, I glanced around in panic. We were approaching a very busy intersection, and I fully expected to see another vehicle coming towards us to hit us or something. I followed Cindy's finger as she excitedly pointed out the window. Thankfully, I discovered that her startled look came not from an oncoming vehicle, but rather from a beautiful rainbow that God had painted across the sky in front of us. "Look," she said, as she called out to Gabriel in the back seat. "Look what God put in the sky for us to see." Startled by the love of God. As we drove towards home, all eyes and words were on the rainbow. After each turn, Gabriel shifted his position so as not to lose sight of God's wonderful display of colors. Cindy fielded questions about why God put it there and could we touch it. I soaked up that moment. Glancing down, I noticed that we were almost out of gas, so I pulled into a service station. By the time my brief task was done, the rainbow was gone. Gabriel was still searching the sky, though, and Cindy was pointing out faint hints of color where the rainbow had been just minutes before. While pulling onto the highway, I looked over my shoulder to see the oncoming traffic. This time it was my turn to be startled. "Cindy, do you see that?" I said with excitement. Both she and Gabriel strained their necks to look out the side of the car. Just over the horizon was the most brilliant sunset we'd ever seen. The sky was on fire with the brilliance of orange and yellow light, startled again by the love of God. Life lesson? I've always admired God's approach to creating faith. He shouts at us through a blaze of colors, yet does not force us to acknowledge him. He paints a stripe across the sky, but does not force us to look up. He inspires wonder in the heart of a child, yet does not force that child to serve him. Like a father who wants to be wanted, God waits just out of sight and amazes us with hints of his presence. For those who want to see him, he's obvious. For those who wish to dismiss him, he's obviously absent. Faith is a choice. Look for him. May I change it? Mental health is a choice. Practice the steps of the Messianic mental health program. Rejoice, be gentle, and be anxious for nothing. I pray that helps. Sonny Childs, until next time, thanks for being with me on Lord's Day Live. God bless you. Be there, Matthew 16:26.